Let's see okay. All right, today we have Erin Kim, who is joining us. And Erin is a story first strategist and expert in digital sincerity. She currently is creating with Google Design. She's shaped their social media identities, but she's also done this work for Entertainment Weekly, Sweetgreen, and Architizer. She's a collaborator and an artist, and Erin illuminates our everyday means of connection, experimenting with formats on social media with her zines, and through spoken experiences where she's been a
No, I'm
guest.
waiting for my food.
Ooh, please mute. Thank you. Where she's been a guest at Creative Mornings and The Moth. If you guys haven't checked out Creative Mornings and The Moth, I'm going to put it in our little chat. You guys should all check it out as being all creatives and Parsons students. So anyway, here we are. Please introduce and welcome Erin Kim. Yay!
Yay! Thank you for having me. And thanks for having, if you're able to have your camera on, it's great to see your faces, and imagine that you are all in my room, which is my bedroom, and we're all hanging out here. So thanks for doing that. Yeah, I guess I will dive right in. You're gonna get to know me pretty well, so I'm not gonna further introduce myself. So let's see, I'm gonna do this now. All right, can you all see my screen okay? Sweet. So yes, I've been tasked to do a little number on our origin story, what that is, why that's important, as I know you all are just about to graduate, and I'm sure that's a super easy breezy time where you don't have to think at all about how you look like in the world. So I'm here to try to help with that. And my position is that our origin story is actually inside of us. It's our interior narrative. So there are these stories that we tell about ourselves to the world in so many different ways, be it our resume, be it our Twitter or our Instagram presence, or even how you dress. Those are these external languages, but there's also something going on inside of us. So I'm going to explore that with you. So first off, what is an origin story? My framework is that it's simply the fixed events in our lives that have left deep impressions into our souls. It's where our story begins. So the meaning of how we interpret our origin story and these events that have made us, informed us into how we are today, that the interpretation will change, but there are some stuff that we can't deny has happened to us or that we have been a part of. And for example, famous superhero origin stories. I'm not a comic book expert, so I know some nerds are gonna probably burn me for saying something wrong here. But Batman, I believe his origin story is that his parents were murdered, and so he was determined to fight criminal justice, injustices in the world from there on out. Spider-Man started by getting bit by a spider and being exposed to radioactive something something. Wonder Woman actually has several origin stories, but was made out of clay by these gods, given gifts by Zeus, yada yada. So that's kind of a sort of otherworldly origin story example. And I'd love for you, if you could in the chat share some origin stories that come up while I begin to share my own origin story. So I'm going to break it down a little bit in elements so you can get a bigger picture of what's going on in the story. We've got the main character of myself, Erin, who has been a constant outsider, always kind of the other category. So for example, in different environments, she was born in New Jersey in a 95% white town. So she was always perceived as kind of this other person in the classroom and in her upbringing. And then in South Korea, she was like too American and was too good at English, but that's also where she developed her tech finesse and became comfortable with like, yeah, tech literacy. Um, then moving to Seattle in high school, so constantly trying to make new friends. And feeling really weird and different. Everyone already had their friends. And again, finding home through online means. And we've got some recurring characters, which are my family members, my brother, who's a smartass and always made me feel bad about myself. And then we've got a really caring but also very staunch mother who was really hung up on me being a good kid. And my father, who wasn't really in the picture. And we'll talk about that some more. And we have some supporting characters who have helped me as I've struggled through uprooting in these environments, like my mom, teachers, some friends, and the internet. So these elements, the stuff that's kind of like the fixed stuff that I can't really change. I like my parents, we moved. I don't really have much of a say. So this is part of the stuff that is in my roots. And those lead me to questions. And I call that my map. So having these events in my life led me to asking things like, so what is my voice? There's so many people and things around me. How do I express my voice? And how can I be authentically myself and build meaningful relationships despite cultural barriers, despite challenges that come my way, despite my brother telling me to behave a certain way, or and what does the language of caring look like? Growing up in different places, I was never really sure, like, do I actually have friends? Do people care about me? How do I show people that I'm thinking about them? Things like that. And those questions, then exercising those thoughts becomes part of my toolkit. It leads me to these capabilities, these characteristics that are a part of me, such as adaptability, hypersensitivity, and exercising empathy. So being adaptable, being able to quickly read environments, read the scene, and acclimate to different cultures, recognize people have different realities, being fluid with language, um, being really sensitive to unsaid cues, so reading beyond the surface, and also locating fellow outsiders, other people who feel kind of anxious or left out, and empathy, noticing when care is present or when care is void. So altogether, my summary of my origin story, it can be said in a lot of different ways, but I've laid it out here as an Asian American insider outsider who's tried and failed to build relationships in shifting environments from the East and the West Coast to South Korea. She found community through blogging, developing agility with digital spaces, and she's driven by the hope of connecting with fellow searchers through unexpected and unspoken languages. And so from all this, I've developed some values that I've only recognized recently. I didn't know all these things when I was like 18. I was like, my values are authenticity. Didn't happen like that. But in hindsight, I see that my values that arose were authenticity, sincerity, vulnerability, and empathy. And I'll elaborate on what I mean by that further. So why do our origin stories matter? I have this, and you're looking for a job, and why does your family upbringing or what happened to you years ago matter? One side can argue you'll be fine without that, but I'm going to show you some reasons why it's going to set you apart, and it's not only going to influence how you approach your work life, but also just how you carry yourself, hopefully in your daily life too. So the first value is our origin story is the source of our point of view. It's the root of your individual voice. It probably feels super competitive knowing that there's so many people out there looking for work, and or so many people who maybe have the same job title as you, or it feels like you're putting yourself in a box by some like corporate entity. um, but instead of trying to think like, okay, how can I fit in, if you look at your origin story, you're going to see that you have a unique way that you've lived and unique lessons that you've learned that no one else has. And from this, you're going to have your own sense of gravity and weight. So when people interview you, they'll see like, oh, this person has a point of view, has a perspective that I'm not seeing with other people. And even with friends, with people that you encounter in life, your point of view is carried through the words you speak, and not just in what you say, but your style. And so for me, uh, a big value of mine is authenticity, and so I try to bring that to work. And I think different brands were drawn to me being very like conversational and communicative and honest online. So I try to help brands have this human voice. One brand being like Entertainment Weekly, for example. I try to be this translator and matchmaker between Hollywood news and between entertainment nerds, and give each other what they want. But this was largely driven by engagement and metrics. And so I felt a friction in being authentic, because it didn't, if the ultimate goal was for rising numbers and followers, something about that didn't sit right with me. um, Another example, I worked at Sweet Green, which is like a farm to table startup that started in the 2000s. And yeah, they're on this trend of bringing like local organic food to urban spaces. And basically they were driven by looking really cool and making salad very hip. So I try to tell stories on Snapchat and Instagram in really like sexy ways and make salad sexy. um, but that didn't feel authentic to me either, because it was just about, it felt kind of faux. Like, this is an example of I helped to set up their Twitter customer service strategy, which was not in my job description, but anyway, that's startup life. So it's basically like flirting with this guy who loves a sweet green salad, and I tweeted back at him like, "Hey, are you coming back to Sweet Green?" Just because I literally personally remember that he tweeted us, and he was like, "Wow, you just won the internet and my heart," just because I thought of him. And I was like, "This feels fun." But I'm still coming into this friction of like, can a business, any corporate entity or institution be truly authentic? So coming to terms with my point of view of authenticity and this sort of, I don't know, blame it on capitalism, like the ultimate goal being trying to sell you a salad, is, are we really being friends here? Um, and so this leads me to my second value, which is knowing your origin story is a practice in knowing yourself. So the point isn't necessarily for other people to know who we are exactly. The point is for us to be in dialogue with ourselves, and that will come through in the way that we carry ourselves. So as I worked in different companies asking this question of how can brands be authentic? How can I bring this voice to brands? I realized that a big question of mine was, how do I be authentically myself in how I work and how I live? And how do I live and work in a way that aligns with my values? And also, what does leadership look like if it's not aggressive, masculine, and hustly? A lot of the working cultures that I've been a part of, I realized it wasn't just about the content that was important, but looking at my team and looking at the leadership that was setting example for me. Um, Oftentimes, they would be really loud, really bossy, and not very empathetic. And I felt really disempowered. So after working at several different places, I came to freelance and consult on my own. Um, and I realized that I wanted to challenge the notion of how we work. Does it have to be in like 9 to 5, 10 to 6, almost every day? Um, that sort of system, or can I make my own system? So I would work remotely. I would work from Copenhagen or from London. And I also self-published a magazine. I would do random things that I didn't always get to do, like draw or sing. And G was actually a big support in helping me to self-publish that magazine. So the story all connects. It was a big, about 2 years of my life where I was like building my own, trying to make my own utopia of how to work. Um, and the third value, knowing your story helps you recognize that everyone else has their own interior story. Recognizing our story helps us see that there's a story that we've been telling ourselves, and there's also a reality or a story that other people are living in. And I think that was also part of some of my conflicts at these working places. My bosses had this idea of what they want of me, or the story of what success and leadership looks like to them, and they've been told, you know, that it's this sort of way, and it wasn't really meshing with mine, and there was something that wasn't adding up. So as I was freelancing, I came across this opportunity to work with Google, and I was actually really hesitant about this, because I was asking myself still these two questions. Can a business be authentic, especially a huge one? So is there a point even in me contributing my storytelling skills to a tech org? And also, can I be authentically myself in a business? I still wasn't really sure, or a business that wasn't my own. Um, but I realized that the job opportunity was largely driven by, it wasn't driven so much by metrics and engagement or trying to be cool, but it was actually driven by storytelling and by people. So a big priority of my current team is to get to know the people working at Google. Oh, okay. Sorry, I heard myself. It's get to know the people at Google, and really be honest and true to their experience and relay that out into the world. So I still haven't answered those questions of can I be authentically myself, and can a tech org or a business be authentic? But I didn't have the answers to it. So I decided to explore it, and I still don't have answers, but I'm on that journey. So, and that leads me to my last value, which is knowing our story helps us exercise empathy. Um, and before I go into elaborating that, I would love to hear from you on what you think empathy is. How do you define empathy? Because I think it's a commonly misunderstood, or I just want to challenge how we commonly understand it. So either in the chat, or if you want to quickly like turn your mic off and just chime in, empathy is blah blah blah. That would be great. I'll just give like 30 seconds or a minute to hear if anybody wants to sound off. Take a stab.
Important.
I agree. Anyone else? Oh, I see stuff in the chat. Listening and understanding, relating to others' emotions, being able to put yourself in other people's shoes.
Being open to the things you don't understand.
I like that one. That's a good one. I like it. Yeah, these are all great. I'm gonna go into my definition. You keep feeling the empathy in the chat box. So I think our common perception is it's about putting yourself in other people's shoes. And in order to do all these things that everyone's saying in the chat, of being able to relate and feel with others, empathy is about showing up first for yourself. And doing that will allow you to show up for others. So intimacy with ourselves, accepting ourselves holistically allows us to more deeply connect with the life that surrounds us. And if we go back to our elements and that map of questions and use our toolkit, we are able, I believe, to tackle whatever life throws our way. And in this practice, we'll also recognize how other people have given us strength and empowered us so that we can also give back to people who also need that. So this leads me to the last part of my story, which is being authentic with my own narrative and my own whole self. So in college, I faced a career curveball, and I thought, I was doing fine at NYU. And one winter break, I went to Korea where my mom was and found her really sick. And I didn't recognize her, and it was really scary. And this was due to the fact that my father, who was supposed to be taking care of her after her open heart surgery, he was out gambling and mentally and verbally harassing her for all her money. And he also used all my college savings. It's a little bit of a TMI, but also it's about being honest about my whole self. I would be lying to you if I said I did everything my way and I got everything that I wanted. But that's the point of our origin story. It's about looking at the tough stuff. And for several years, it was very confusing because we moved in together while I was in college, and I would have to explain to people if they ask me like, oh, so who are your roommates? And I'll be like, I live with my mom, and people will say like, oh, that's easier. You're saving money. You're not paying for rent, and she cooks all your food for you. It must be easy to like live that way and not have to like live like a real adult or whatever. And so when society threw this narrative on me, I kind of hid this part of me, and I wouldn't tell people that we live together, or I was trying to think like that what they're saying is not the narrative that I'm living. So how can I reclaim that? And as I started to accept myself as I was freelancing and as I was putting out my art and stuff, I realized that I do have the power to own all parts of me. So I used my toolkit and all of this to help me realize that this is part of my story. It's not just this thing that I'm going to put into the closet and say, no, I don't want to look at that. But this actually gave me the strength. So in seeing my mom, my hero, the person who has been a key character in my origin story, being hurt and losing her strength and giving care for her, that helped me to see that empathy isn't always just this simple, nice thing. Empathy knows what darkness looks like. And empathy in action is the courage to point a flashlight of hope into that darkness. And because it has a familiarity and a sense of what it can be like to be in pain and to be in suffering, empathy also knows real joy. And so today, I still grapple with my own narrative, but I'm also able to locate moments of delight, like my mom doing weird stuff like this. And so every time we share a joke or she does something silly, it really warms my heart because I also remember at the same time when that wasn't there and when I thought I would never see her smile again. So empathy captures all of that. So in summary, practicing our origin story, it's a self-dialogue, and that will help us to practice empathy, also known as accepting ourselves and accepting others. And that ultimately cultivates resilience so that whatever comes our way, and I'm pretty sure that the things that you think are going to happen in your life, it's not going to look exactly like how it's going to happen. And so this will this will help you have the confidence that like, okay, this is part of my story and I'm just going to see how it all comes together. So to bring it back to like how you present yourself in our society that wants to know exactly what you are, here's what I say when people ask me like, so what do you do? I'll say, I'm a storyteller. And for brands, I write and create content to relate companies like Google and Entertainment Weekly to their consumers. And with everyone else, I'm an artist and I'm interested in how we connect with meaning. So you'll notice that that didn't really talk very much about a lot of the stuff I mentioned, but this is the tip of the iceberg. And, you know, as a conversation is had, maybe the other stuff will come up. But if it doesn't, that's fine too, because I know it's in my point of view and it comes with me in other ways. And I also wanted to show you my resume because I'm sure that's something you're working on putting together. So I just want to show you how it compares and contrasts to this origin story. And you can stalk me if you want as well, and analyze it too. But so, you know, I have my education here, some cool moments that happened to me in school. People endorse me apparently for social media skills. I've currently work at Google. I still do some consulting. Worked at Architizer, Passion Password, different places, all doing social media in different ways. And basically to me, this reminds me that I was constantly asking this question of, can a brand be authentic? And I was not satisfied. So sometimes I would try to go somewhere else. And can I be authentic at this workplace? And a lot of times I couldn't. So it was about constantly trying to find that answer. But there is no one better looking resume. Some people might work at one company for forever, and that's not better or worse than mine. Yours is going to take your own shape, and that's the most important thing. It's not about trying to make it look like the best resume, just make it authentic to you. And clearly my origin story is not front and center here. But again, that's kind of in the undercurrent, and you'll know that. And yeah. So now we get into the fun stuff, and I can stop talking about myself. How can I, as in you, uncover my origin story? So I have some ideas, and my notion or my proposal for you is to start the dialogue, and you can do that by setting the scene. And what I mean is try imagining a theater stage or room and fill it up with moments and characters that move you. So those are like those elements in the beginning, the fixed ones, and use the following themes to identify some moments, and you'll get specific. I have a tip to maybe try using Post-it notes so you can visualize it and move it around and have a bigger picture. So these are the sorts of different dialogues that you can enter in from whichever one feels comfortable for you, or you could do them all. But you can start with the present, which is the questions that you're currently asking, and use that as a map. Or you can start from looking at your past, so collecting those elements and building out your toolkit. And you can also look starting from the future of imagining your utopia and using that as a compass. And what I mean specifically by that, so if we get a little bit deeper, so looking at the present, this moment, I would ask you, what internal questions or problems are you exploring and wishing to solve at the moment? What's your current inquiry about the world, about yourself? And you can try to use like books that you're drawn to or things that you find that you're looking for. What sorts of topics or themes do you engage with, and what really excites you? Or also in contrast, like what really turns you off? That can say something as well. And is there something that you could talk nonstop about? And maybe that's part of it as well. So it could be maybe you're asking questions about like technology and how to, I don't know, create certain frameworks in technology, or maybe it's about topics of beauty or entertainment, or even topics about yourself of like what does creativity look like or leadership look like. So just exploring those questions. And I would actually love to turn the mic back to you. I'll give about like a minute, or if you feel more comfortable in the chat, that's fine as well, to share some inquiries that you feel like you're currently drawn to, or like themes that you think are exciting you and taking up your brain space. Yeah. So you can either turn your mic off and whisper into my ear, or put it in the chat. Don't be scared. Oh,
Or
I went to
shy.
the pass.
I
Oops.
guess I can try to answer that. I've been surprisingly kind of connecting a lot with social justice, which I never considered or thought of, but it
Yeah.
seems to always end up connecting to me.
Yeah, that's awesome. I feel that. Yeah. Yeah, I'm thank you for sharing. And I'm seeing people chime in on the chat with family, wellness, relationships. Oh my gosh, I love this. I can't keep up. How to deal with pain and healing modalities, build communities. Nice. Oh, this is so great. I'm so inspired. This is awesome. Yeah, self-improvement. Yeah, you're on it. You're ready. You're doing the self-dialogue. Thank you for sharing. While you mull on that, and you can do this later for longer, hopefully, I'm going to move over now to the second dialogue, which is looking at your past. So this is collecting your elements, and this will lead you to your toolkit that hopefully you can build upon and use throughout your life. So looking at these moments about when you were encouraged in your life in a big way, and when you were challenged or shook up in your life in a big way. And to remind you, I believe that suffering and pain, and also joy and delight and celebration, those are all in the same house. For whatever reason, socially, we tend to just do the celebrating thing, like on social media. But even that, I don't know if that's true celebration. Like, I think that's like social celebration moments. Anyway, now I'm gonna get into like a social media philosophical rabbit hole. But so my point is that the heavy stuff, you can either use that to let you bring you down, or you can use it to strengthen you. So even if it is annoying to look at the people or the moments that hurt you, if you feel okay and safe to accept yourself in those moments, those can be a huge part of how that can strengthen you and be an awesome part of your narrative. So this one, I would also love if you can either in the chat or unmute, and share if there are some moments in your toolkit or past that come to mind, either in whatever shape it takes, or a person in your life that was a recurring character, or like a person who helped you through challenging times and opened doors for you. So yeah, or if it's like a place that you grew up in, or a place that you went to that left a deep impression on you.
I can definitely share on that. So, for me, moving to the States was particularly hard because I was coming from the Caribbean, and the way that the culture there is just so different. Like even the way that the school curriculum is, how you're brought up, is completely different to the States. So it was kind of like a shocking eye opener. And within the first week of going to school, I changed my accent completely. Like I started to speak like everybody else because I was constantly told that I was weird. And it's funny because when you're at that particular age in adolescence, like your teenage years, nobody wants to feel different. Like you strive to not stick out. So yeah, like I quickly kind of just, buried a part of me, and like not being able to speak like how I speak naturally. I had to like sacrifice a part of my like what I identify with, honestly.
Yeah.
And I remember the time that I actually reclaimed that. It was my senior year, and I was just like, I am so done trying to just speak like everybody else. I'm not the one with the accent. Technically, to me, they're the ones with the accent. And I mean, I was ridiculed horribly for it. Like people kept saying my accent was fake, or a lot of people tell me that people are always trying to box me into what I sound like, first of all, which can get very it's testy. But yeah, like I was ridiculed, but part of it felt like shit. No, like this is a homecoming. Like this is me coming back home to myself, because I'm comfortable in this element. I'm truly myself, and there's so many other parts that come with being able to take that step for me. So yeah, but any hardship is obviously, to me, always better in hindsight. Like, oh yeah, I remember that. Like, wow, we went through a lot, but it's way better to look back than to actually be going through it in the process.
Yeah. Wow, that was amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, you can give my talk. That was beautiful. Yeah, and I'll be excited to see how you uh, keep living out your story and seeing how you carry that attitude and that strength forward. And I'm going to assume it sounds like it's only built itself up for you to keep going, instead of holding you back. So that's awesome. Thank you. And then the last category I want to look at with you is looking at our future. And so this is kind of fun because there's no, like, you just use your imagination and imagine your dream society, your utopia. If everyone did what you said, which might be a dangerous proposition, but it's just imagining what would this world look like, your perfect world, and what are the behaviors, the cultures that are happening here? How do people engage? How are problems solved? And then consider where these ideas might have risen from in your present moment or in your past, and you can use that as a sort of compass. Not to literally manifest that utopia, but just kind of get you on the right track. So, and I would also love to turn the mic back to you for a minute or two and hear either in the chat or unmute about what in a perfect society would you love to see people doing or behaving, and in what way, or what kind of characteristics or attributes do you think are carried through in your personal utopic society? An equity-centered society, more community-based work. Nice. A society where people don't consider themselves separate from each other or to the earth, interconnectedness. So good. A world where there's love and equality for all, more collectivist society. rather than individualistic, leading with love for nature, respect for every culture, generosity over competition, feeling safe and comfortable, a society where we say chicken tenders and not boneless chicken wings. I love my boneless chicken wings. Universal health care. These are awesome. I am ready to live and put all our collective forces together to manifest this utopia. Yeah, thank you. And so as you keep doing this dialogue, you can't do it all in a couple of minutes. So hopefully you'll get to keep doing it with yourself if it speaks to you. But some tips as you go through these exercises: play around with the sequence. If you decide to, write it, jot these moments all down, see what stories emerge. The sequence is not always linear. Something that happened like a long time ago could connect with something that didn't happen the next year, but years after or whatnot. And see what sorts of connections lie between the light and the dark moments. Because as I mentioned, I really believe that they're all kind of put together, and you might see that they're not so separate. Try sorting based on a feeling or skill, and leave room for questions and loose ends. It's not like a 1,000-piece puzzle where everything's going to make sense. So you're going to see this is exactly what happened and why I'm the way I am. There's going to be, we're not going to figure out the whole thing. It's a constant practice. It's a dialogue, a self-conversation, and the mystery is a part of that human narrative. And as mentioned, how we make meaning of our story will change. You'll maybe now or before, like Mercedes mentioned, like as that moment in her teen years was happening, it was not really looked upon probably in a positive way, but frustrating. But in hindsight, we'll see how the meaning changes, and it helps us develop our toolkit to show up as our whole authentic selves. And some parting thoughts: having an origin story is a lifelong self strategy. It helps me show up in the world and give love as big as I can. And I'll never understand the whole story, but empathy is also, as someone said already, embracing that there will always be unknowns in both myself and in other people. And we don't have to try to make our origin story. It's already there in us. So don't feel like you have to make a Wonder Woman story out of nowhere. Just look at what's already happening and what's happened and will happen. And it will keep writing itself, whether we work on it or not. So every once in a while, I hope that you can turn to your origins like a book. And whenever you crack it open, I hope that it gives you strength and doesn't bring you down, because that's where you'll find your unique individual resilience and wisdom. And that's it. This is my contact information. Please don't be shy. I'm happy to support you. I was really excited when G reached out, because I love people. So if you have questions or feel stuck on your journey, write me if you feel like it. And thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Erin.
Yeah.
We're going to open up for some Q&A. I wanted to ask a question just to kick off the Q&A section. Are there any moments, or have you found that your origin story, because I mean, some of the stories that you're sharing are really personal, and have you ever found that do you bring it into the workplace? Has it helped you with work in any way? Like, what does that look like for some students where they're just like, when am I supposed to be sharing the origin story, and when does it feel appropriate? And does it help in my professional world at all?
Yeah, I think you'll know, or it will happen and it will surface when the time is right. I think there were several years when I was still uncomfortable, for example, with accepting that I was my mom's caregiver and accepting that she was like, or caring for her was part of my story. And so I wouldn't really talk about that at work. And I also didn't feel comfortable with my bosses at the time to let them in on that. I didn't feel like it was their right to know about it. So, but actually how I found my current work with Google, my manager, Carly Ayers, she runs an event series where creative people can share their story in like 5 or 7 minutes about whatever they're working on or whatever they want to talk about. So I met her through that event series where I actually did a very brief talk about becoming my mom's caregiver and how that influenced my professional life. So I guess in a way we almost met, and I found this opportunity by showing up as myself. And she already knew that these things, personal things about me. So, and I think because I was able to be honest and not let someone else put their assumptions on me, I felt more comfortable to work with her because I had some confidence that she knew where I was coming from with some things. So yeah.
Any other questions? You guys can raise your hands or put in the chat, whatever feels comfortable for you. We have a few minutes that we want to leave open. And when I say raise your hands, you're going to have to raise your digital hand in case that wasn't clear. I'm not going to be able to maybe see you all. Any questions for Erin?
Oh, it looks like I'm seeing a couple things in the chat.
Leica, do you want to go and ask your question directly so that we can put a face to a name?
Yeah, sure.
A name to a face.
So the question was like, so how do we, like, especially when we're starting out, how do we tell our story in a professional setting? For example, like in an interview with a company that we really want to work for, how do we show our story without wasting their time, or like in this fast-paced interview setting?
Yeah, I think it goes back to that point of view. So thinking first as you go through these exercises, thinking about, so like, what's my unique perspective that I have about the work or about life, and what am I bringing to the table? And if you think some personal elements add color to the story of how you have this point of view, you could share it. But I think it also depends on the other party and how receptive they are. I mean, I guess you'll never sort of know 100% how they'll react. But if you feel comfortable and if you think that adds to your perspective and shows like, oh, you know, this person has a unique background, has a unique way of thinking, I think that helps set you apart. So yeah, hopefully that helps thinking about your point of view.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah.
Erin, earlier there was someone who had asked about your role at Google. I think they were just curious about what do you do there, and how does that work in terms of what you're doing as a storyteller?
Yeah. So I work on a small team called Google Design, and you can check out our website. I'll type it here. We're basically like an online magazine or an editorial publishing platform, and I'm a content strategist. So I help to edit some pieces or add some light to the words and give perspective there, and mostly focusing on social media and how do we present these stories and narratives to an external audience and make it really engaging and story first. So we do think about like metrics for sure, because that's a natural part of the language of social media, but I'm largely thinking about the narrative, like how do we make it really exciting and interesting and special. So
Thank you.
yeah.
Ashley, I noticed that you have a question. Did you want to ask that directly to Erin?
Sure. I was just curious, based kind of like your first question, but how do you create like an authentic resume? Like how do you show that this individual point of view perspective that you have, but on paper? I know that usually when recruiters are like looking through resumes, it can all seem kind of bland and equal.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot of ways to it. There's the visual element of design and being creative, but still like legible. My resume is pretty bare bones, so I don't have much insight on the design side. You might, but I would say on the words front, being really thinking about the specific value that you gave to that you shared with wherever you were working in those experience, and going back again, for me it's all about your point of view, because that is something that I don't think can be mimicked if you really try to write from your particular angle. So it's on the one hand sort of keeping in mind maybe like sure what people expect to read on your resume, but also thinking about like what do you really want to say about the work that you were proud of, or the lessons that you learned from a work experience that other people might not have on their resume. And again, it's also just the tip of the iceberg. So just teasing it, not, you don't have to say everything, but just introducing some of the top line, exciting, interesting stuff to get people to be like, oh, maybe it's worth having a conversation with this person. So yeah.
Looks like we have another question from Sojourner.
Hi, yeah. I was just wondering if you could talk about your transition into consulting. It sounds like a really difficult like switch for me. So I'm just curious if you can describe how like you had to navigate building your network in order to go to consulting, or like how that kind of works for you.
Yeah. So I think actually the first time that I thought about going freelance, I didn't. So it took me, I raised the question for myself and I talked to some people who were consulting and freelancing, how it was for them and how their transition was. And once I got some ideas, I just kind of kept that with me as I was doing my work. And then the startup I was at, they had to let go half of the team. And so I just kind of found myself in a place where I suddenly had a lot of time. And that question that I raised a year ago about, am I ready to freelance? I think I want to, but I'm not sure. I'm kind of scared. I felt more comfortable because I was already thinking about it and having that dialogue with myself. And then I just thought about some of the people that I've interviewed with, or people that I felt like left a positive impression on me that I wanted to pick up a conversation with. I wrote to them and said, I'm starting to take on projects or take on clients. And yeah, that kind of led to different conversations and opportunities. So I think it happens differently for everyone, but yeah, that's how it was like for me. It took a bit of time and also some conversations, and yeah.
It looks like we have also a question from Sophia.
Hi, okay, so this kind of goes off of Sojourner's and Ashley's questions about like resumes and like kind of transitioning.
Mhm.
So like when I was doing this assignment for this week, just like coming up with different experiences and like kind of fleshing a couple of them out, I really like understood the term of like no one really knows what they want to do when they enter college. So like in terms of like resumes and like transitioning, how like do you have any like suggestions for those of us who may have started out in one field or industry and have like robust experience in that industry, but now like don't want to be in that industry and like don't have like applicable experience to what we're actually like working on in school?
Yeah, um, I love that. I mean, again, it probably feels like it's a setback, but actually, that kind of stuff is what really adds color to your perspective, and can if you embrace that as like a part of your, you know, superhero sort of um, awesome parts of you, then that will come off. That was a very improper way of saying that, but it will show through in a professional space. People will be like, "Oh, that's interesting." But if you kind of hide it and be like, "Oh yeah, and I did this thing that's not related to industry," they'll be like, "Oh, that's maybe they're not relevant," or I don't know. But if you kind of embrace that as part of your story, um, and I would think about in those experiences, maybe it wasn't the technical parts that you'll translate into the new industry, but think about like what sorts of values or sort of maybe less tangible lessons did you learn from those experiences to help you to do what you can currently do. For example, if you used to work in film, but you're now going to work in tech, maybe your narrative sensibility with filmmaking can help you think about the narrative experience in UX and what a human desires from a tech product, thinking about that personal experience. So I think it's all about framing how these connect, because they all do. And I think that's actually what makes a cooler story. So use that to your advantage.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, we have another question with Anshu. Oh, Anshu, just here. You just no?
Yeah, no, I still have my question. Thank you, Erin, for your lecture. I was just wondering if you ever experienced like resistance bringing your vulnerability to the workplace, like personally.
Yes, all the time. Yeah, I think it's a constant resistance and a constant struggle, especially after some workplaces where I realized like, oh, my boss's idea of what leadership looks like is not the story of leadership that I'm telling myself. And that was really hard. And I had at that time made the decision after a year to leave because I felt really bad about myself because I wasn't becoming the leader that they wanted me to be. And I also wasn't becoming the leader I wanted to be. Um, but I think in that moment, I don't think it would have been helpful to be vulnerable because I don't think they would have listened to where I was coming from, or I also don't know if I was ready to 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 say what was going on. So that's kind of a windy way to say. I think you'll know when you're comfortable and with the right team, like to what degree you will be vulnerable with them. You don't have to be vulnerable. You shouldn't force yourself to be vulnerable. It should only happen if you feel like that will help them understand your perspective, and if you feel like that is a gift that you're ready to give. Like vulnerability should not be demanded of you. So yeah, I don't know if that helps, but I think if there's a specific instance, I can kind of help with that. But generally speaking, yeah, I would say that. So
Awesome. Great. Any last questions before we let Erin go? No? Okay. Thank you so much, Erin. Let's give her one round of silent applause or with the mic on, whatever feels good for you. I know it's so awkward with the Zoom. Thank you so much, Erin. It was a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you. And you guys have her contact. So if you do want to reach out, please feel free to, and use her as your resource and your connection. That's how you network. Thanks, Erin. I'm going to have everyone else hold back.